Today we're doing another Instagram Live for leasing during COVID. What happened was last week on Thursday, we did Instagram Live, and for some reason we had some technical difficulties.
My fault.
His fault. I'm sure we'll run with that. I thought it was my fault, but cool. And now we're re-recording so that everyone who didn't have a chance to see it last week can hear us talk about leasing, the challenges, the underwriting, and everything that goes along with the leasing market during COVID for Los Angeles apartments.
For sure, and there's definitely been a shift, right, from a year ago. And I was talking about how, look, the transaction landscape has changed with sellers and buyers, especially as we head into the holidays and into the new year. It really slows down. And now that it's the middle of January, people start getting back into town. So I think the leasing environment that we saw from March until November, November, December, early January, definitely shifts. There's a seasonality to it as well as on the transaction side. So I think we're going to start seeing leasing pick up. We're doing some leasing on a couple of our buildings that we'll talk about. But I mean, there's no doubt about it that LA specifically has taken a hit in the rental market from the ownership side, right? It's become a renter's market. Rents have dropped, there's higher vacancies, and there's a shift in the renter mentality of what they're looking for, what they want, the price they're willing to pay. And we want to talk about all that today and like what these shifts are and why they're happening.
True. And we'll also talk about the different sub-markets because Los Angeles is a large place and we don't even cover the whole LA. I mean, there's pockets of LA we don't own in. We don't own in the Deep Valley. We don't own in South LA right now. I mean, LA is just a massive place. So we really look sub-market to sub-market, whether it's purchasing something, analyzing an acquisition, thinking about getting more aggressive, looking into different areas. You got to really look at the demographic, the tenants that are attracted to that area. Why are the tenants there? And then what's the effect been on the rental market because of COVID? So, for example, the buildings that we have in the Pico Union area, Westlake, those markets that are closer to downtown, a little bit of a lower end marketplace, those have not been hit quite as hard. And the reason is because a lot of those workers, a lot of the tenants in those units are essential workers, meaning they can't work remotely. They can't do their jobs from afar. They have to stay in LA. So those people have stayed in LA and they keep renting. Conversely, in the West Side markets where you have a lot of tech workers, those workers, a lot of them are able to work remotely and a lot of them have families to go home to in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. And at the onset of the pandemic, March, April, a lot of those tenants, they left their apartments, they went back to their parents' basement and have been working remotely. Some of them have come back, and I think as we're in this new year with the vaccine rolling out, a lot of them are starting to come back slowly but progressively. But there still has been a more significant hit to the West Side markets, the higher end markets, than there has been to the lower end markets and the areas close to downtown.
Mm-hmm. And I think, right, we've probably seen like a 10% drop in rents in these kind of like mid-tier markets, mid-city, Koreatown, Pico Union, 5 to 15% probably average out to 10. But on the West Side, we've seen 10 probably being the minimum, upwards of 20. I know you're signing a new lease. You're kind of taking advantage of the opportunity.
Fingers crossed.
we shall see. But right, like there's people kind of taking advantage and
hopefully they're not watching.
Well, then we'll drop them to 30%.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think the West Side, these higher end markets, the reason why they've taken such a hit, at least in my estimation, there's kind of two factors that I see is that the rent is so high. So with job security being a real issue, I personally wouldn't want a $5,000 rent, like a monthly, overhead hanging over me. And a lot of people are seeing that. It's like, why should I pay $5,000 to live here? A, I don't need to be close to work. I can work from anywhere. And B, if I lose my job, I can't afford this rent anymore. So I think affordability is a factor where if you look at Koreatown, right, a 2-bedroom is probably $2,000. In Venice, Santa Monica, it's $4,000. So, big shift there. And then the other thing is, a lot of people on the west side are roommates. They're young people. There's 2-3 people living in these units, and now there's uncertainty. There's risk, right? Who is my roommate hanging out with? Who are they going to have over? What if I'm going home to my parents next week and I don't know what my exposure has been. So, affordability and these roommates is really causing some of these higher end markets to see a larger decrease in higher vacancy rates.
Also, at the onset of the pandemic in March, April, you had, let's say, 3 people, let's use easy numbers, you had 3 people splitting a 3-bedroom apartment, paying $1,000 each. One person leaves because they go back home, they get freaked out, they go back to their parents or wherever. Then you have 2 people with the same $3,000 rent. All of a sudden, they have a 50% increase. They're now paying $1,500 instead of $1,000, right? And then how are those people supposed to sustain that? So that either they go to the landlord and ask for a reduction in rent, or they all just kind of boogie and go back wherever they can go. And so those roommate situations, the landlords that have had roommates, ourselves included, have gotten, it's been tough. It's been tough to handle those vacancies and refill them. And what basically we've been doing, and a lot of landlords throughout the city, is giving incentives to tenants. Obviously now we're competing for a smaller pool of tenants, same amount of units, actually perhaps more units, because you had a lot of construction that was going on prior to the pandemic. So a lot of buildings have been completed, and now you have more supply, fewer tenants at the moment, and so landlords are pretty much forced to offer concessions, offer incentives to tenants, move-in specials, gift cards, free rent, etc. And again, depending on the market, depending on the demand within the market, will kind of determine how much of an incentive, how much of a reduction in rent the landlord needs to give to the tenant.
And even though it's become a little bit of a renter's market, us specifically, and I know owners across the board, because there's the eviction moratorium, you don't know if tenants are going to pay rent once they move in, we're getting significantly stricter. I would say, we got a ton of applicants on our 9-unit Pico Union. We turned down a handful of them because what happens if you get stuck with that tenant and they're not paying? Right, a year ago, we probably would have accepted 80-90% of them based on income and credit, but now, what is their income? Is it going to continue? Are they getting unemployment? Are they not? So there's a lot more risk from the owner's perspective. So we're getting stricter in the tenants that we're accepting. But then we have to balance that with every month you carry a vacancy, you're basically, if you have a $1,200 rent, every month you're losing $100 per month. So then you might as well rent it for $1,100, right? So we're kind of balancing all of these. Now, the impact that's happened on LA, right? LA has historically been one of the most desirable locations, cities to live. And why? The weather, the beach, the entertainment, the nightlife. Well, what's happened is the entertainment, the nightlife, bars, restaurants, right? They've all basically closed. There's no more experience. And renters, probably majority of renters are, around 30 years old. We're the experienced generation. We want to do things. We want to be out and about. We want to be with people. And if you don't have that option, then why pay to live in LA? It doesn't make sense, right? But ultimately, short term, that's the impact. But I think long term, that's all going to come back, right? It has to. I don't think that, there's definitely some permanent changes, but long term, bars, restaurants, live events, concerts, comic show, stand-up comedy shows, those are all going to come back, which means people are going to want to be in LA again. The beach isn't going anywhere and the weather's not going anywhere.
Right, exactly. So we have that inherent value. LA is still the entertainment capital of the world. Entertainment, media, tech, they're kind of all swimming together. Entertainment, tech. I'm definitely not a tech, we know that. So we definitely believe in the long-term prospect of LA, people wanting to live in the experiential world with entertainment, live entertainment, bars, restaurants, nightlife, and all the things that people come to LA for. We believe that once the vaccine is spread out and distributed to the public, which it's slowly being distributed. So over the next couple months, we're definitely optimistic that people are going to start trickling back into Los Angeles after the city reopens. For now, it's definitely, like you said, it's a balancing act, because the last thing that we want to do is accept tenants who are going to stay in the units, use the utilities, and basically can do damage to the units, essentially be a liability, and then say, hey, I'm not paying rent because there's an eviction moratorium. So for us, we really are looking, besides the numbers, right, besides the credit score, besides the income verification, we're also looking into the ethics and the morals behind the tenant. And so, for example, not going to mention any names, but we did have a tenant reply, and that tenant was filed for forbearance on a property that they own. So while the tenant was offering, to give us X amount of rent up front, and was making a case for why they deserve to qualify for the unit, we figured that if they're filing forbearance on another property that they own
and fighting the forbearance, that they probably at some point would butt heads with us. So we're definitely doing a lot of due diligence, trying to balance that with not having too many vacancies so that we can still have cash flow distributions for our investors. We're definitely moving forward with acquisitions because, again, we do believe in the long-term prospects of LA apartments, and specifically the demand within the core of LA and the more prime areas. But we are being more picky for the time being with who we accept in our buildings. Totally. And I think, right, the landscape's going to go back to where it was. I see more supply. I think there's going to continue being more and more supply of new buildings, but we're optimistic, long term in the next 12, 18 months of LA continuing to be a strong market.
Is that all?
I think that's it. These are your notes, so.
These are my notes. So we're optimistic,
good.
Right? We're optimistic that people are pent up. They really want to go out. I mean, I know. I haven't been out in a minute. Because, I go to the office and it's like, woo, we got a TV here, it's great.
Drive.
Yeah, exactly. So we're optimistic that things will get back to normal. Matter of timing. Yeah. Got to be careful. If anyone has any deals that you have motivated sellers, we'd love to take a look. We have 3 current exchanges. We have 2 current exchanges and 1 down leg that's closing in about 3 to 4 weeks. So please send us your deals. Please be in touch. If anyone wants a Goldfinger Group hat, reach out to Maxx. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.